Welcome to Israel Now News. I'm Rebecca Roberts.
And I'm Yochanan El Rom.
In our top story, the Pentagon has announced that the United States has dispatched one of its nuclear submarines to the Middle East. The Ohio-class nuclear-powered sub is one of the largest in the U.S. Navy's arsenal. It can be equipped with ballistic and cruise missiles, and some of them are armed with nuclear warheads. U.S. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin told Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant that the sub's deployment reaffirmed the U.S.'s commitment to deter any state or non-state actor seeking to escalate this conflict. Austin was clearly referring to Iran, which funds, trains, arms, and directs Hamas, as well as its proxy army, Hezbollah, in Lebanon. Hezbollah has fired dozens of rockets and anti-tank missiles into northern Israel, causing the evacuation of several of Israel's northern communities.
The Israeli army has hit the Hamas infrastructure in the Gaza Strip above and below ground and has completely surrounded the terror stronghold of Gaza City. IDF spokesman Rear Admiral Daniel Hagari announced that there is now North Gaza and South Gaza, explaining that troops led by Golani Brigade's reconnaissance unit had reached the coastline and were holding it. The IDF opened a humanitarian corridor to allow civilians to evacuate northern Gaza to the south so that troops can face Hamas head-on. The military continues to urge all Gaza civilians to flee the area of conflict immediately, warning them that Hamas intends to use them as human shields.
Leaders of the Hamas terror group remain emboldened by their genocide against the Jews, and they are determined to continue their campaign of slaughter until they control the entire land of Israel. One Hamas leader recently praised the massacre, saying that the October 7th attack was just the first and that there will be a second, third, and fourth. Ghazi Hamad called on his nation of martyrs to continue to attack until Israel is annihilated.
Ambulances operating in Gaza have been used to transport Hamas gunmen and weapons. One emergency vehicle was targeted in a precision strike, killing several terrorists. The Hamas terror group has taken over several hospitals in Gaza and is using them as command centers for their genocidal campaign against the Jewish state. U.S. officials uncovered a Hamas attempt to smuggle dozens of terrorists out of the war zone and into Egypt in a convoy of injured Gazans. In addition, the IDF discovered trucks carrying aid to the Gaza Strip have also been stocked with military equipment intended for Hamas. Industrial air purifiers were found in an aid shipment concealed in boxes of cookies. These oxygenators purify the air in the extensive network of terror tunnels that Hamas has constructed under Gaza.
The fanatic Islamic Republic of Iran held celebrations marking the siege of the American embassy in Tehran in 1979. Radical Islamists flooded the streets calling for death to America and Israel while burning the flags of both nations and holding signs calling America the Great Satan. Iranian leaders addressed the crowds praising the October 7th massacres in Israel and called for more violence against Jews. A top Iranian commander hailed the Hamas genocide as the greatest success of the Islamic world. More than 1,400 people were killed that day by Hamas, and more than 240 are still being held hostage by the Iranian-backed terror group in the Gaza Strip. The radical Shiite state continues to sponsor, train, and arm terrorists on Israel's borders while it races to complete a nuclear weapon that it has repeatedly said it will use to wipe Israel off the map.
The U.S. House of Representatives has passed a bill requiring annual reporting on Palestinian educational materials. The Palestinian Authority and Hamas are notorious for creating a school curriculum designed to indoctrinate Arab children to commit attacks against Jews. This legislation aims to make sure that Americans are not funding terror education. The measure explains that textbooks used by the PA include graphics portraying violence. The material also praises individuals who have committed attacks against Israelis and encourages Palestinians to target Jews. The bill requires the U.S. Secretary of State to issue yearly public reports on the status of Palestinian teaching materials in the schools in the PA territories and the Gaza Strip, and to determine if U.S. foreign assistance is being used to fund the dissemination of curriculum containing incitement.
Leaders of the Palestinian Authority's Fatah party have publicly called for the murder of Jews throughout the biblical heartland. PA Chairman Mahmoud Abbas's Fatah party has stepped up its calls to slaughter the Jews in Judea and Samaria, and Fatah's Nablus branch secretary recently called on all Arabs to unite to kill the Jews. Fatah's armed wing, the Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigade, has also bragged that it was involved in helping execute more than 1,400 Israelis on October 7th, saying that the terror group played a prominent and clear role in the genocide. It published video footage of its fighters participating in the massacres and praised each one of their martyrs.
A group of 9 bereaved Israeli families have filed a war crimes petition against the Hamas terror group in the International Criminal Court at The Hague. The families, who are still in mourning for their murdered loved ones, are demanding the ICC prosecute the Iranian proxy army for war crimes and issue international arrest warrants for Hamas leaders. Bloodthirsty Hamas terrorists do not deny their crimes, just the opposite. They have filmed their atrocities and have broadcast them for the world to see. In some cases, the terrorists stole their victims' phones and posted gruesome images to the victims' social media accounts in order to torment their families and friends. This evidence will assist prosecutors in building their cases against the terror group if the ICC chooses to pursue the complaint.
Israel's national airline El Al has announced that it will no longer fly over Oman as a security precaution. This change in flight patterns will result in longer flight times to destinations throughout Asia. In February, Oman opened its airspace to the Jewish state, shortening flights to Thailand and Japan by several hours. Unfortunately, the anti-Israel sentiment throughout the Middle East and the world since the onset of the war with Hamas has caused the airline to reconsider the safety of this route.
Israel has cautioned Jews around the world against wearing religious symbols, including the Star of David, for fear of anti-Semitic attacks. Assaults on Jews have skyrocketed globally since October 7th, when Hamas launched its genocidal war on the Jewish state. Israel's National Security Council has cautioned Israelis against traveling abroad and warned all Jews everywhere to be on heightened alert. Israel's foreign ministry echoed this warning, saying that Jewish neighborhoods, religious and community establishments, Israeli delegations, and airports with flights to and from Israel are key targets for protest and attacks by anti-Semitic groups.
The Hamas terror group is notorious for using civilians as human shields, but now they have employed a new tactic: the human barrier. The Iranian proxy army has reportedly forced hundreds of women and children into the line of fire, using them as a human barrier between the terrorists and the IDF. Israeli soldiers from the Givati Brigade reported that while they were advancing on a Hamas operations base in the Gaza Strip, they witnessed terrorists forcing women and children into the line of fire between the IDF and the terror base. An Israeli officer described the scene and said that the IDF stands ready to face more instances of such cynical and brutal use of civilians.
The TikTok social media application is under fire for inundating young people with anti-Semitic and anti-Israel content. The Chinese-owned platform has been overloaded with anti-Semitic clips that spread lies about the conflict with the Hamas terrorist organization. TikTok has aired graphic footage of the October 7th brutality and has done nothing to stop those who praise the massacre. A group of TikTok creators has demanded the platform take responsibility for perpetuating anti-Semitism and has insisted on the implementation of safety features. So many young people use this application as a source for information that a recent Harvard Capps-Harris poll revealed that 51% of young adults justify the Hamas genocide on Israel based on information they gleaned from TikTok.
Israel's Defense Minister Yoav Gallant has called on the people of Gaza to shorten the war by killing the leaders of the Hamas terror group themselves. Gallant said that the IDF is taking out Hamas terrorists in a calculated manner, one battalion at a time, and that eventually it will reach terror leader Yahya Sinwar and eliminate him. He appealed to the people of Gaza who have been oppressed by the terror group, saying that they can shorten the war if they get to Sinwar first.
That concludes the news portion of our show. Stay tuned now for Ask the Source with Josh Reinstein.
Hello and welcome to Ask the Source. I'm your host, Josh Reinstein. We're here in our beautiful studio in Jerusalem. My guest today is Poch. He's a spokesperson for United Hatzalah. Raphael, thank you for being on the show.
Thank you.
Tell our viewers a little bit about what is United Hatzalah.
United Hatzalah is a community-based national EMS organization. What that basically means is we have first responders in communities throughout the whole country, and we're able to provide emergency medical response ahead of ambulance arrival, both within communities and across the entire country, together as part of a major network.
We're seeing United Hatzalah all the time since the attack on October 7th. United Hatzalah has really come into action. They're on the front lines. Can you tell us a little bit about that experience?
At the beginning of the war, our volunteers in the south were obviously the first ones affected, those who live in the communities that were most badly hit. Sderot, Be'eri, Re'im, in those areas, and they told dispatch what was happening. So we very quickly mobilized about 1,500 volunteers and sent them down to the Gaza periphery in that first few hours. By 10 o'clock, there was already dozens of ambulances, hundreds of volunteers. We set up a whole staging area, and then from there on, began treating civilians as well as military personnel who were injured throughout the time period of the war.
1,400 dead, almost 6,000 injured. How taxing was this on your network to have to deal with such a mass genocide?
Well, the difference, I guess, for the attack was the scale. We're used to dealing with, even mass casualty incidents. We're used to dealing with medical emergencies at a moment's notice, dropping whatever we're doing and rushing out to respond to an emergency. So that wasn't different, but just the sheer scale of what was taking place was something which was very, very taxing on both the volunteers who went down and the whole system as it went on. The volunteers who went down were transporting 10, 20, 30, 40 people within an hour out of the Gaza periphery to ambulances. We sent down all of our reserve supplies, medical supplies that were going on from our warehouse to the south. And what usually takes us months to go through took us hours because every single person we were treating was a critically injured person, a severely injured person, multiple gunshot wounds, stab wounds, etc. So a lot of our reserves went very, very quickly, which is unusual for us, and we had to restock continually.
There's always this talk about a divide between the ultra-Orthodox and secular in Israel, but during this war, those communities have come together, and we've seen it in United Hatzalah, thousands of people volunteering for this type of work. What was happening in that community that got people so involved?
Well, United Hatzalah, we're always unified. That's part of the name. Even in the organization, it's part of the ethos. So everyone working together with Jews, Muslims, Christians, ultra-Orthodox, secular, everyone coming together from all different styles of life in Israel. So that's nothing that's necessarily new for us, but what we did see was other members of the community who aren't so connected with that ideology stepping out to help in any way, shape, or form that they could. On Shabbat of Simchat Torah, which is a major holiday here, ultra-Orthodox people left their homes and their synagogues and drove to intersections to give lifts to soldiers so that they could get to base faster. And that was considered life-saving enough to be able to break Shabbat for it. It was a sense of unity we rarely see.
On October 7th, we saw the images of the terrible genocide and torture and attacks that happened there. We see the attacks in the north. But what are some of the other examples of things that United Hatzalah is dealing with from everyday people because of the stress and the anxiety from what we're seeing during the war?
The stress and anxiety was created mainly with the major attack and then the ongoing rockets continuously. And that's something which, again, we're used to dealing with. We've established already from 2016 a psychotrauma and crisis response unit, which deals with psychological first aid issues and helping people get through traumatic incidents in the moment, not waiting for a couple days or weeks, but like responding in the moment as a unified or integrated element of our emergency response. We send psychologists, psychiatrists, therapists, social workers to go and treat people at the scene, be able to provide them with the tools necessary to move beyond the traumatic incident and continue a little bit of normal day life.
Bible-believing Christians are Israel's best friends around the world. How are they getting involved with United Hatzalah?
A lot of support has been shown on social media, sharing a lot of the stories, the positive stories coming out of things and there are some that have come out of the conflict. You mentioned a couple of coexistence and people coming together to help and communities supporting one another. We felt a lot of that from the Christian community as well, both through sharing our stories as well as supporting us with donations, which is something that's vital for us to be able to restock our medical supplies and protective gear to allow the volunteers to do what they're doing. I'll give one short example. right on the first day at the Supernova Music Festival, one of the volunteers who was there was a Muslim from Nazareth who was providing medical coverage, and he was killed by the terrorists while trying to save someone's life. And we posted about that on social media when we found that he was indeed killed, and it was shared widely by numerous reverends and even some bishops in the United States who were supportive of what was going on. And one of them reached out to us and said, this is a true hero, and we're going to share his story and make sure his name is not forgotten amongst our community and practitioners. And that was very, very moving for us in terms of the Christian community stepping out and saying, here we're going to remember a Muslim volunteer who is saving a Jewish person's life, and the Christian community is going to come and honor that.
Raphael, there are literally tens of millions of people watching this show. What message do you have for our viewing audience?
I think the message is twofold. One, share the positive stories that come out of human tragedy. The best remedy for human tragedy is coming together to support one another, both as a community and as an individual. So share the positive stories, share stories of heroism that have come out, and really show your support for Israel that's coming together. In order to support our organization and the work that we're doing in the lives we're trying to save, you can donate to our website at israelrescue.org. And that's something which is going to be helpful. Every donation made is literally saving a life. We do not get government subsidies. We're an organization based completely on donations. So every dollar we have is another bandage, another tourniquet, another protective vest that we can use in the field to save lives.
Thank you, Raphael, for being on the show. And thank you for tuning in to Ask the Source. I'm your host, Josh Reinstein. Now back to the studio.
Up next, the truth from Zion.
Iran views Syria as a crucial ally in the region. The alliance provides Iran with a direct land route through Iraq to Lebanon, where its proxy army Hezbollah controls the country. This advantage gives Iran a much greater hold over the Middle East. Since the early stages of the Syrian conflict in 2011, Iran has played a significant role in propping up the government of the war-ravaged country. This support has grown dramatically over the years, leading to a dangerous geopolitical dynamic, and it's pouring over into the Holy Land. Iran is doing all it can to support Assad because without his approval, the rogue Islamic Republic would have difficulty operating in Syrian territory. The United States and its allies have taken measures to counter Iran's influence in Syria. This includes economic sanctions and targeted military strikes against Iranian-backed forces. The international community, however, has been divided on how to address this complex issue. Some nations think having an open dialogue with Tehran is the best way to move forward, while others insist Iran must be dealt with from a position of strength and power.
As far as Iran goes, this is the single biggest state sponsor of terrorism in the world.
Despite the U.S. State Department repeatedly labeling Iran as the world's #1 state sponsor of terror, the American government struck a controversial deal with the radical Shiite regime. The agreement called for the release of 5 imprisoned Americans in exchange for jailed Iranians and access to $6 billion in Iranian oil revenue that had been sanctioned due to Iran's illicit nuclear activities. The American prisoners held in Iran had been detained for alleged spying. Oil-rich Gulf states like Saudi Arabia and Bahrain are concerned about regional security, especially as information continues to leak out detailing Iran's ongoing work to enrich its uranium supply in order to produce weapons of mass destruction. It's important to note that Iran's involvement in Syria has significantly impacted the course of the Syrian civil war, and their support has been pivotal in helping the brutal Assad regime regain control of certain key territories. The Iranian payoff was moved from a South Korean account to a central bank in Qatar, which said the funds would only be released for humanitarian purposes. To say that Israel is skeptical of the deal would be an understatement. Critics argue the money sent to Iran will be channeled right back into supporting extremist groups and terrorist activities. Iran's presence in Syria is a major concern for Israel, with Iranian forces deployed near its border.
Iran is the #1 terror country around the world, spreading terror all around the world, including Syria. What they do in Syria is sending troops, sending revolutionary guards into Syria, sending ammunition in purpose to have militias in Syria and also to actually bypass through Syria to Lebanon and then in the end to attack Israel.
Iran has repeatedly threatened to wipe Israel off the map. For Israel, it's not just words. Israeli Defense Forces routinely strike targets on the other side of the border in an effort to safeguard its national security interest, prevent the transfer of weapons to terrorist groups, and counter growing Iranian influence. Iran also supports the Hamas terrorist organization in the Gaza Strip along Israel's southern border. Iran is surrounding the Jewish state by equipping and training Hezbollah in Lebanon, Hamas in Gaza, and having its own forces inside Syria. Iran's military involvement in Syria has been substantial. The Ayatollahs have provided critical support to Syrian President Bashar al-Assad, including paramilitary groups, weapons, and at times their own Revolutionary Guard forces. This has been instrumental in stabilizing the Assad regime and led to his brutal suppression of protests during the Syrian civil war. Assad's regime has also been accused of using chemical weapons against its own citizens, a violation of international law. The United States, Israel, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and numerous other countries want this dictator out of office. The exception, of course, is the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps of Iran. Recent reports show the IRGC is providing weapons and conducting training for various militant groups operating out of Syria. Most of the world does not know the extent to which the IRGC is involved, but Israel is keenly aware of it. After all, Israel and Syria share a border and have been to war in the past. And now, shining light from Israel.
Nestled just south of the modern city of Tel Aviv is the ancient coastal city of Jaffa. Go to Jaffa. That was an insult for fishermen and seamen from the Netherlands who worked here in the 1600s in the Jaffa port. That's because this port was so dangerous. There are jetties and rocks in this shallow water that make it very difficult for large boats to come in to drop off goods and people. Did you know that the Jaffa port has been operational for more than 7,000 years? That's older than ancient Egypt, which is one of the oldest societies in the world. Here at the Jaffa port, exports included leather, soap, glass, ceramics. But one thing that was needed to import here was wood. Story time. Did you know that Jaffa was mentioned in the Talmud? That's right, King Solomon had a strong relationship with the ruler of Tyre, Lebanon, and because of that connection, he was able to secure cedar wood from up in the northern part of this coastline. It was brought all the way here to Jaffa and then taken down the road to Jerusalem, where it was used to build the mighty Second Holy Temple. The three Abrahamic religions are represented all right here in Jaffa, and Christianity is one of them. Here we are at St. Peter's Church, where Christians believe that St. Peter came and raised Tabitha from the dead. Tabitha was a woman who was really revered by those in her community, and when she died, the neighbors were deeply disturbed. And that's when Peter apparently came, prayed, and brought her back to life. Underneath this church is a Byzantine temple as well. St. Peter's Church was restored in 1903, and in 1799 it became famous for hosting Napoleon from France, who made a campaign and stopped over here in the Holy Land. In addition to that, you should understand that St. Peter's Church is still in service, and in fact, the prayer ceremonies are conducted in Polish, Hebrew, English, and Spanish. Moving into the modern part of Jaffa, here we are in front of the clock tower. It's an orienting landmark and it's quintessential to the feel of the city. I know I'm in Jaffa when I see this, but did you know that there are actually 7 in total around the state of Israel in historic cities? This clock tower was created by an Israeli who was commissioned to honor the Ottoman Sultan Abdul Hamid II. There's a biblical story that I'd like to share with you, and that's because it takes place here in the Jaffa port. And this is a tribute to the story of Jonah and the whale. Jonah heard from God that he had a mission to go to the people of Nineveh and convince them that they needed to do better as a nation. Instead, he goes down to the Jaffa port and gets on a boat going in the very opposite direction. Well, he didn't know that God had a plan. He was thrown off of the boat during a violent storm and tossed right into the belly of a whale. He ended up being successful in his mission, and now it's our mission to take you to see some other sites in Jaffa that are really impressive. This ancient city is still thriving. It's thriving with Jews, Arabs, and Christians who all live here. Having beautiful jewelry and arts and crafts and handmade items from local artists. You may even be tempted to take a boat ride and see the beautiful Tel Aviv coastline. You can also dine at wonderful restaurants. On your next trip to Israel, make sure to come visit the ancient city of Jaffa.
That's all for this edition of Israel Now News. I'm Rebecca Roberts.
And I'm Yochanan El Rom, reporting from our studio in Jerusalem. Please join us again next week for all of your Israel updates.